Hi, I'm Gareth Green, and in this video we're just going to dip our toes into the water of Beethoven's very last piano sonata. Wow. Well, there are lots of things we could say about this piece, and we haven't got time in the scope of this video to be exhaustive, but we'll focus on the opening of the first movement. It's interesting that this last sonata, which he started composing in 1821, finished at the beginning of 1822, is a two-movement sonata. And actually there are quite a few of these piano sonatas that Beethoven wrote in two movements. And quite often there's a kind of relationship between the two movements. The two movements in the same key or in parallel keys. That's true of this one, this last sonata, his opus 111, where you've got a two-movement sonata. The first movement's in C minor, the second movement's in C major. There are a number of thematic links that we might make between the two movements as well. So it's quite interesting that Beethoven is at the end of his life thinking in this kind of more integrated way. The second movement is all kind of sort of theme and variations basically, although it gets quite interesting because is the coda a coda or is it the last variation? You know, he starts to sort of blur the detail of that one. The first movement certainly got sonata form going on, but we've got bits of fugato and so on as well. So a kind of little bit of a mixture of devices. But the main thing I want to focus on is kind of what's distinctive about this kind of latest of his piano sonatas that's really pointing us to what's going on in the Beethovenian style at the end of his life. Well, one thing we could talk about is this kind of main idea that's used when we get beyond the opening introduction into the Allegro con brio. And again, there's another interesting parallel which we could make. I mean, there are lots of parallels we could make. If you look at the Pathetique Sonata of Beethoven from earlier on, well, you're in the same key, C minor. You've got quite an extended, slow-moving introduction, breaking into an Allegro con brio. It's exactly what's happening here. You get this very distinctive thematic idea that he introduces with this. Sounds like something out of silent movies or something, doesn't it? But this sort of three-note thing, C, E flat, B natural, very sort of short, but very distinctive idea that he revisits throughout the movement and in fact makes a sort of reference to it even in the second movement. If you take C, E natural, B natural, you'll see that it's the first note of the theme of the second movement. It's the peak of that opening statement and then it's the last note of that statement, C, E, B. So there's a kind of link and a way of integrating the movements there. But what I really want to focus on for the next few minutes is what's going on in this introductory section, this maestoso, because I think it's telling us something about where Beethoven has journeyed in relation to his approach to key, to harmony, and telling us something about the legacy that he left for the composers who followed him. And we'll see very quickly why composers like Liszt did what they did later on in the light of this kind of writing. So let's just kind of look at this opening. It's very dramatic. You've got these double dotted rhythms. Double dotted rhythms? Well, that kind of reminds us of the Baroque French overture. And what happened in the French overture? Slower section with dotted rhythms or double dotted rhythms moving into a faster section. That's kind of what's happening here. So in a way, he's looking back. He's kind of drawing on an idea of the French overture. But harmonically, we're in a new place. So here it is, folks. It's a sonata in C minor. So what's the first note? E flat. Okay, that's good because that belongs to the tonic chord of C minor, so all is well. What's the second note? F sharp. What? I thought we were in C minor. And all we had was that opening very quick note and then F sharp. Nothing to do with C minor at all. So that's peculiar. And what's the relationship between E flat and F sharp? A diminished seventh interval. Goodness me, what a funny way to start a piece of music in C minor. It's a long way from the early stuff, isn't it? Where Beethoven writes back at the beginning, you know, things like You know, it's just spelling out the tonic chord of F minor in that sonata. And here, well, we don't know what we're doing, do we? If we're hearing E flat, F sharp, and then what do we get? Oh, very dramatic, forte, SFs, all this sort of stuff. Diminished seventh chord. Okay, diminished seventh chord, I suppose that's a perfectly possible thing that you could be writing if you were Beethoven by this point in your career. But it's not a diminished seventh chord in the key of C minor, is it? I thought this was supposed to be a sonata in C minor. Goodness me, does this man know what he's doing? He sure does. So we get a diminished seventh chord here, but when we think about key referencing it, it's actually a diminished seventh chord in the key of G. Now, that could be G minor, it could be G major. How do I know that? Well, a diminished seventh chord is always a pile of minor thirds, or the equivalent of minor thirds, by which I mean you might bump into an augmented second, because an augmented second is enharmonically the equivalent of a minor third. In other words, it sounds the same, just looks different. If I go C to E flat, that's a minor third, but if I go C to D sharp, sounds exactly the same, but it's an augmented second. Why does this matter? When you have a diminished seventh in its root position, all of the notes are genuine minor thirds. They're not augmented seconds. Let's have a look at this chord. F sharp, A, C, E flat. They're all genuine minor thirds. F sharp to A is a minor third, A to C is a minor third, C to E flat's a minor third. Once we know that, we know we're in root position, and then we can go a step further and key reference the diminished seventh, because a diminished seventh chord is usually built on chord 7. So chord 7, F sharp A, C, that's chord 7 of the key of G. Now it could be going to G minor or G major. Let's see what Beethoven does. So he has the opening E flat, F sharp, and then he does this dramatic repetition of the diminished seventh and does it again and again, puts a trill on for good measure, diminuendo, and then he goes to this chord at the beginning of the second bar, second measure, G major. So for everything that's gone on since the beginning of the piece all the way to that point is a diminished seventh in the wrong key. What? Yes, it's a diminished seventh in the key of G. The sonata's in C minor. Beethoven's lost the plot. Or has he? Because he uses a diminished seventh in the key of G, but then when he gets here, he goes 5-1 in the key of C minor. So isn't that clever? You use the diminished seventh that belongs to the key of the dominant chord, and then having confused everybody, you just say in a very understated way, piano, let's just have a perfect cadence in C minor. 5-1. Simple as that. And he's back in C minor. Well, all is well with the world. Then we had this little bit of drama where he kind of spreads this thing, which is a dominant chord, and then states it again. So that's what all this fuss is about. And that is the dominant chord in C minor, chord 5, in the first inversion. Okay, so at least now we're in the key of C minor. We're beginning to feel a little bit more settled. You know, Beethoven went off on one at the beginning and almost landed in the wrong key, but just saved his bacon and ended up with that 5-1 in C minor. Now we've got chord 5 in C minor. All is well with the world. As soon as he's done that, he then hits A flat. Now we're back crescendo forte with an A flat. Well, all right, that's not the end of the world, is it? A flat is in the key of C minor. And he does this thing again. Dum, pom, this falling diminished seventh that he did at the beginning. And then we get all this diminished seventh stuff again. Just as he did at the beginning. With all the trill and everything, it's an exact transposition of the opening. So if this is another diminished seventh, well, which key are we in now? Well, actually, all is well with the world, because when we look at this diminished seventh, B, D, F, A flat, we discover it's a diminished seventh in the key of C minor. Could be C major, but C minor. So that's a relief, isn't it? In our sonata, in C minor. B to D, minor third, D to F, minor third, F to A flat, minor third. So we think, oh yes, now we're on course. So a bit of drama with these diminished seventh chords. They really add to the drama. A bit of a trill, So you think, ah yes, well he's had a little E natural in that trill, so we're going to go to a chord of C major perhaps. Or he could have had a trill with an E flat to a chord of C minor. What does he do? He does his little trill, flags up the E natural, so we think, oh, it's not C minor, we're going to go to C major. Then he does this. What? It's another diminished seventh in the wrong key. Oh my goodness, what's going on this time? Well, let's have a look at this diminished seventh and see if we can key reference that. Get it into root position, so you've got genuine minor thirds. You'll find it goes E, G, B flat, D flat. Okay, so what's that then? It's built on chord 7 in the key of F. F major, F minor, what? So what happens here is you have a diminished seventh in the key of F, followed by the chord of F minor. Oh, so we started off sort of in G major when we should have been in C minor. We then kind of sorted ourselves out with the perfect cadence in C minor. We then kind of enjoyed that for a brief moment with a chord 5 in first inversion in C minor. Then we got all dramatic again and went for the diminished seventh big time, but at least we're in the right key now, so all is well. And then all we need to do is have another perfect cadence in C minor, but in fact now we've got something that's akin to a perfect cadence in F minor, using the diminished seventh of F minor, followed by the tonic chord of F minor in the first inversion. Well, what on earth are we doing in F minor? Well, I suppose it's not far away from C minor, is it? F minor is the sort of subdominant key. Also, the chord of F minor is, even though it's called 1 in F minor, it's also called 4 in C minor. So maybe this is the game, you know, that we've got this F minor chord is called 4 in C minor. We had this G major thing up here that we were initially puzzling over, but actually that's called 5 in C minor. So he's kind of gone one side of C to go to G. Now he's gone the other side of C to go to F. So yeah, beginning to see there's a little bit of possible neighbouring key stuff. And then he sort of carries on sequentially. He has this little bit of a flurry using the dominant chord of F minor. So there's the dominant chord in first inversion. It's the same thing that he was busy with up here, so that makes sense. And then you think, now what on earth is he going to do? Well, the next thing, so you think, oh, right, so D flat, E natural, that's the top and the bottom note of that diminished seventh in F minor. Oh, right, so he's going to carry on in F minor. Well, at least we know where we're going now, I suppose. And we're going to have another kind of bit of a drama going on around that. We're going to have ta-tam and all this stuff. What does he do this time? He does this, and then he does this. Oh, now then, that's not really what we did before. So what's he doing now? Well, this chord is a B flat minor chord in second inversion. Oh, so are we going to the key of B flat minor? Well, I suppose it's possible. C minor's got 3 flats, F minor's got 4 flats, B flat minor's got 5 flats. Maybe he's just sort of budging around the circle of fifths there. So B flat minor, and then reiterate that with again the trill. So we're thinking, yeah, well, it's probably going to do what we've done before, isn't it? And maybe go 5-1 in B flat minor or something. This time he does something a bit different. So we come out of our trill and then he uses this chord. And it's, again, I love the way that you get this diminuendo back to piano. Doesn't go at all where you think he's going to go now, does it? Because what on earth is going on here? Well, really, if we're thinking about this, this looks like a chord 2-7 in first inversion in the key of D flat major. Okay, well, okay, all is not lost. We were thinking about B flat minor, weren't we, at the end of this second line. D flat major is the relative major key of B flat minor. Okay, well, fine, he's had us in B flat minor for a moment, and now he's going to move to its relative major, D flat major, and he's going to go for 2-7 in first inversion, and then he's going to go 5-7 to 1 in D flat major, and then we'll be quite happy. Does he do that? Does he heck? He goes from this chord, this 2-7 in first inversion in D flat major, and then he changes the bass note. Have you noticed that note in the bass? Budges up from a G flat to a G natural. Ooh. So what does that mean? Well, it means that this chord is now a dominant seventh, a 5-7 in first inversion, in the key of A flat. Oh, so we're not going to D flat major then if we've got G natural, are we? So A flat, okay, well, A flat major, A flat minor, well, we're getting to the point now where we don't really know what's going on. So we get that, and then, at least we've got a tonic chord in A flat major. So we've gone to A flat major. So we've gone 5-7 to 1 in A flat major. Okay, well, he's decided he's now going to sit in A flat major. But not quite sure why we're in A flat major, because we're still early days in a piece of music that's supposed to be in C minor. But anyway, there you go. If he's going to settle in A flat major, well, that's entirely up to Ludwig van Beethoven himself. Does he stay there? So where are we off to now? Then we get another interesting chord where the bass moves up a semitone and we acquire a G flat. Ooh. So this is another diminished seventh. Rather enjoying his diminished sevenths, isn't he? What's this one? A, C, E flat, G flat, root position, chord 7, A, C, E flat. That's the key of B flat, isn't it? So B flat minor, we were there a moment ago. Maybe he's coming back to B flat minor. Maybe he's going to go to B flat major. So going from there to B flat minor maybe, but we get this. And then he moves to this. So when we get to these chords, we suddenly discover, oh, that's E flat minor in second inversion. So you're thinking, all right, okay. So now we're in E flat minor, are we? So we're in a key with 6 flats. Are we in E flat minor? Or is it chord 4 in B flat minor? Well, you know, it could be that we're going to be in E flat minor. It could be that we're using chord 4, then we're going to B flat minor. Who knows? There's the E flat major chord. So I wonder which of those two options Beethoven selects. Well, guess what? Neither. Because then he goes on to this chord. What is going on now? Well, can you see C flat is now at the bottom of this chord, and we've got an A natural as well. So that's interesting, isn't it? You know, because that's an augmented 6. Could this be an augmented 6 chord? Aha, yes it could. In the key of E flat. So if it's an augmented 6 in the key of E flat major, it means at the bottom of the chord we've got a lowered 6. Or if we're in E flat minor, well, we were there just a moment ago, weren't we? It's simply the 6th degree of the scale of E flat minor. Okay, so I've got C flat, that's the 6th degree of E flat minor. I've got an augmented 6 above that. I've got the tonic in the middle. I've got a perfect 5th above the root. So this is a German 6 in E flat minor. Okay. Well, there we are. We'll have a couple of those if you don't mind. And then we're presumably going to go on to do something in E flat minor. Beginning of the next bar, or the end of this bar, what does he do? He introduces a C natural in the bass. So when we look at this, now we've got this chord. That sounds like another diminished 7th, doesn't it? Well, what is it? It's A, C, E flat, G flat, based on chord 7 of B flat. So it's the diminished 7th in B flat major, B flat minor, who knows? But then the next chord, D flat major chord. So now we're back looking at D flat major again. Okay, it's a relative major of B flat minor. So that's what's going on there. What does he do after that? And he's really dropped his dynamic, hasn't he? So there we are in D flat major, but then we move on, C flat, D natural. Oh, so it's another diminished 7th. I'll save your brain calculating this. This is in the key of E flat major, E flat minor. And then he goes to this chord. When we get to this point, you think it's perhaps going to go to the tonic of E flat minor. But now guess what? A flat major chord, second inversion. Okay, well, if we're going to do that, then we're going to go 5-7, 1 in A flat. A flat major, second inversion. Let's repeat it a few times so we then emphasize the expectation that it's going to go to 5/7 and then to 1, so that then he can throw in at the end of this measure, this bar there, a diminished seventh in the key of F or F minor, and then it goes on, oh, and now what have we got? B flat minor, second inversion. Then what have we got? Oh, we've got another diminished seventh in the key of F or F minor. Then he does actually, at least, thank goodness this time, resolve it to a chord of F minor. And then at the end of that measure, the end of that bar, he takes the F minor chord and tucks in an F sharp. So what have we now got? We've got an Italian 6 in the key of C. How do I know that? A flat is the 6th degree of C minor, or the lowered 6th of C major. Augmented 6 above that is F sharp. Stick the tonic in the middle, that's C. Double it if you want to. An Italian 6. Taking us to that G major chord again that we kind of flagged up all the way back here. The dominant chord of C minor. And so he goes on. We still haven't got to the end of the first page, the introduction. There's a bit more shenanigans to come, and then he ends up on this dominant chord again, and that's what then kind of continues across here until it launches us into that theme. So big dominant preparation, and then to yon, and then to yon, bom, pom, and then he flies into the Allegro con brio, and then C minor becomes a more obviously focused key for a while. So all of this introductory thing is all very mysterious, isn't it, in terms of key? We can work out what's going on with the chords. We can work out how the chords function, but things are not doing what we're expecting them to do. Huge reliance on diminished seventh chords. And the great attraction of diminished seventh chords is they're slightly unstable chords. You know, they can go in this direction or that direction. And Beethoven even takes a direction that we're absolutely not expecting. But can you see and hear how this is flagging up the future? You know, what is going to happen? What's the legacy of Beethoven? What is he going to leave for others to follow? Liszt, the great writer of diminished sevenths. He's got diminished sevenths all over the place. Well, where did that come from? Here it is in the Beethoven Last Piano Sonata, the Opus 111. So whatever these later composers do structurally and in terms of melodic ideas, what I'm trying to draw attention to here is what's happening with the harmonic language, what's happening with the sense of key. There's a way in which you can look at this, as we have done, to say actually a lot of these key centers and chords that we're using relate to the tonic chord of C minor, but there's also real ambiguity about, are we really listening to something in C minor, or is C minor just a kind of excuse to go off in all sorts of different directions? That's kind of what Beethoven's doing here. So it's very exciting. It's a wonderful sonata, actually. Probably some of you play it. I'm sure many of you know the sonata. If you've not come across it before, or you've not had a chance to engage with it recently, if you're a pianist, well, have a crack at getting your fingers around it. If you're not, certainly listen to someone perform it. And maybe in the light of what we've talked about today, it will just ignite your engagement, even with just that opening section. So I hope that's been helpful and interesting. Well, if you've enjoyed this video and you're really wanting to know a bit more about, well, how do we analyze this stuff? How do we get to grips with Beethoven? Well, let me point you to the Music Matters website, www.mmcourses.co.uk. If you click on courses on the home page, you'll be able to access all of our courses, one of which is an analysis course that's covering a sonata that I've referred to during this video, the Pathetique Sonata of Beethoven. Another sonata in C minor that has parallels with this one, with this introductory thing using dotted rhythms at a slower tempo, breaking into an Allegro con brio. Well, if you're studying the Pathetique, or you just want to know more about analysis of structure and harmony and textures and so on what's going on inside a piece, looking for ideas for composition, trying to understand that particular Pathetique sonata because you're playing it, or trying to dig deeper inside the mind of Beethoven, that's a particular course that you might find particularly engaging. Lots of other stuff on the website too. www.mmcourses.co.uk